Thank you, Marna. Thank you so much. The music stand is lower than I was expecting. Now everything's fine. Just some quick thank yous as we get started here. Wow, theater in the round, I'm going to swivel a lot. Toki Wright for providing our pre-show music. Toki is our newest DJ at the Current. Welcome, Toki. Thank you to the Dakota. Thank you to for people listening at home on the podcast. We're recording this for podcast distribution later. Thank you to your apps and your Bluetooth devices. Special surprise that we have here as we get started. I went ahead and sprung for a chartered jet and flew in nearly every guest that we had on this past season of The Hilarious World of Depression. They're standing right behind me here on stage. They're all lined up behind several microphones. The people in the audience can see them here at the Dakota. You listening on the podcast, you'll just have to imagine this grand stage, much like the Hollywood Bowl, with microphones lining it. Now, these guests, they're very silent right now. They're very gifted actors, and I've asked them to enact my thoughts as we got this season off the ground and running. Here's what I was thinking when we were getting ready to launch season 2. Season 2, say it directly into the mic, John, because we're recording this for a podcast. Now, the things they say are going to sound a lot like what they said in our episodes of the show, but that's just coincidence. I did not use just a tape sample from the podcast. Trust me. Well, they're out here standing, so I'm going to talk about getting the season going in the first place, because after the success of the first season, it wasn't easy to try to replicate that. I was worried. Season 1 was such a hit, such a revelation. How are we ever going to top it, I thought? How are we going to do so many episodes? And when will the impostor enforcers bust down my door and drag me away, exposing me for the fraud that I am? It's a depression thing. Everybody understands it. Oh, yeah, everybody's sitting here like, I don't know anything about that. Imposters. How will I receive similar love and support from strangers to compensate for the self-esteem I'm unable to provide for myself? Now, part of me was excited to do the show. Most of me, almost all of me. But I live with this nasty little bastard of a co-pilot called depression, so I was stressed out and worried. And as I thought about the challenge of the season ahead, I figured that maybe I deserve that stress.
Because, of course, what God wants is for me to suffer. Yeah, it probably was really depressive thinking, because it was definitely and I still struggle with this to this day, but like this idea of self-worth, an inherent sense of worth. And I wonder, does anyone feel that? Does anyone feel like they're worth anything? Do people feel that way?
Thank you, Hannah Hart. That really summed up my thoughts nicely. And the success of season 1 meant a lot of people now were suddenly involved with the show. Like, we had publicists for the first time, and I didn't like what they were having me do.
It was really important to the adults in my life that I do a lot of like teen magazine stuff. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't like it. It felt stupid to me. The people that worked at the magazines who did the interviews and the photos and stuff were really nice people, and they were always really good to me. But I just felt like this is a distraction. This isn't what the work is about. This isn't what the art is about. None of this matters.
Thank you, Will Wheaton. Then there were the fans, who I love, but they made it clear that they were really counting on me.
Somebody just wrote me this morning like, I'd like you to be my mentor, and I want to be like you. I'm like, I'm fucking nuts. You don't want to.
Thank you, Janelle James. They'd even send me gifts.
I get so many. And first of all, it's great because it's wonderful to have people who truly get you and are like, you know what, I'm going to pay $20 to send a dead animal in the mail. It's also really nice because I think a lot of people probably get dead animals in the mail, and it's not necessarily a compliment. Like, maybe it's more of a threat. Although I will say there have been a couple that were not taxidermied and were just dead, and I was not a big fan of those.
I mean, I love our fans. Thank you, Jenny Lawson. I love our fans, but it can get a little rough. Now, the stress on the show kind of intensified. And we're a small staff making the show, and you have to remember that I am a diva and an egomaniac. It's just who I am. How dare you judge me? But the staff apparently is very sensitive to tirades and me throwing things and setting a few small fires in order to get attention, which is what I use instead of respect. Standard stuff. It fuels me. Long story short, my producers decided to, I guess the only word really is poison me. Not to kill me, just to kind of send a message. They'd give me these energy drinks filled with actual rat poison. That's not a metaphor. And it kind of reminded me of depressive thinking and how isolated it can make you feel, like the whole world is trying to poison you with rat poison. I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so I would drink it, but I came up with a plan, which was to share both my feelings and my poisoned energy drink with everyone all around Minnesota Public Radio where I work.
You know what it feels like, honestly, for me at this point? It feels like the more I share it with the world, the more it takes the poison out of it. It feels like spitting the poison out. So it's not scary. That's just how I cope. I talk about things. Part of what helps me cope with things like being depressed or having looping thoughts is to know that other people go through this, because it makes me feel less alone, and the aloneness, the isolation is the worst part for me. And so it does feel like spitting out the poison.
I tried to fix things. I tried to use reverse psychology with everybody I worked with to get them to, maybe like me a little bit more. It didn't really work.
I would make up nicknames. Professor, oh yeah, don't call me Professor Encyclopedia. And then they'd get, yeah, you're Professor Encyclopedia. And you just call me smart, I sang the solo in the 4th grade school pageant, and I picked up the nickname opera singer after that, whatever. And so these now they sound kind of like sweet nicknames, but they weren't, because they were also accompanied by, beatings and that kind of stuff. So I was having a tough time, and, I really wanted to be, and in retrospect, I can't even imagine why, but I really wanted to be popular, and I really wanted these popular kids to like me, and that desperation, I think, fueled their their ire or their disdain.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to go.
Well, that really sums it up, Rhett Miller. Thanks for saying that. In desperation, I just took off one day. I kind of went missing from the office for a while, told everyone I was doing research, but I wasn't really.
Like I wanted to go to like cemeteries and do like rubbings with the pencil on the the gravestones, and then go to like rock shows, and so that then you had something social attached to your depression.
It was rough. Finally, they apprehended me, my producers, in the cemetery one night, dragged me back. The grave rubbings are still all over my office. Anyway, we put our differences aside, but I was still kind of in a weird place because of the stress and the depression. I was alternating between lashing out and lashing in.
It was just like, I get in this like weird futile place when I'm like sad, or I'm like, it's like this anger cycle where I'm really sad and I'm depressed, and I like spiral into all the horrible things and why I'm not good enough for this and why I'm ugly and why all these things. And then it turns into like, it's like, no, it's the world that's bad. It's like, fuck them. And then it goes back to me being sad, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, it was an up and down thing. Patty Harrison, thank you for explaining that for me. Anyway, season 2 was coming up, and I had a lot of work to do. I had to conquer all this stuff that was going on inside me. So I did the logical and mature thing and just locked myself in the office with a bunch of messed up string.
The weirdest part of those habits that I enjoy that help is undoing knots. When you have a lot of yarn and string and whatever, like it will get knotted unless you're totally like completely organized about it, and I'm not. And so, but there's a part of me that when I see a really nasty knot, like on my yarn's
got a little excited.
I get a little. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be a tough one.
Anna Marie Cox is able to do so many voices when she acts. Eventually, they came in and took the string away, and I had to really get to work. So I thought about, all right, what skills do I have? What can I fall back on? What kind of education? But the education that I remember was no help at all, really.
I went to 2 different colleges for 3 years without accumulating a single credit. I think I should be given an honorary degree for that. I think that's really hard to do. I failed every class or was incomplete on every class. I would go to school, but I would not go to class. And I discovered the library pretty early on, and they had listening rooms at the library with tons of records that I'd never seen before, like John Cage records and experimental music that they didn't have at Record Bar at the mall, you know. So they didn't write about it in cool magazines that I discovered by then either. So that was my introduction to that, and I would just go there and I'd take a nap in these big gigantic pod-like chairs and then listen to a record.
So that wasn't much help in getting me to the right mindset. But then I thought about why I got into public radio in the first place. It wasn't just to tell stories and fundraise on the air.
It's also a savior for me and a safe space for weirdos and and et cetera. But and a place that made me feel less crazy. And I think that I found community. That said, I also I was willing to literally throw myself, into the air and really not care.
That got me into a lot of trouble during a brief stint as an associate producer on As It Happens. Finally, I decided that the best way to get to work was just to get to work. Don't worry about how to do it, just do it. And so I started really trying to become somebody who could do that. I tried to become a different person entirely.
I felt like there was some other person that I was supposed to be, and that if I worked really hard, it wasn't a matter of it being cosmetic, it was a matter of that if I worked really hard, I could just decide to be this other version of myself that would be much better and much more, interesting and not talk all the time, which I did, and would be better at getting along with people and wouldn't have all these things, would keep my room clean all the time. And I had this idea that there was somebody else that I was going to eventually turn into, and that never happens.
Yeah, I kind of gave up on that. So then I thought, well, let's work on something else. Let's maybe work on sort of a side element of the show. Maybe replace the song. Rhett Miller's song was pretty good, but how hard could it be? So I sat down to write a new song.
And I remember writing a song about, I guess it was about homeless men. I don't even know, don't even think I had seen homeless men or hobos. I get where, I don't even know what I was talking about.
Yeah, the hobo song didn't, I just decided to stick with Rhett's song. Finally, I went to see someone.
I would see a therapist, and I would really just go because after we would get apple pies from McDonald's. And so I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll see this therapist. I'm getting apple pies, baby. I'm good.
I need a...
So was it the therapy or was it the pie that started to get me on track? It was the pie. And figuring out also how I started trying to figure out how I could just get these shows written.
A lot of time by myself in order to write and do my thing. There's a very specific balance of company and solitude that is integral to my mood and my well-being.
Finally, cautiously, I started edging towards maybe feeling a little bit better. And I thought...
optimistic. I think when I've been at my best, my mantra has been, it'll work out. You'll figure it out. Something will come along. And it's equally accurate as a prediction as things are only going to get worse, and you're going to be depressed and sad and miserable because you can't predict the future. But it's much more fun and manageable to go through with that mantra than the other one.
I mean, after all, I said to myself,
I'm optimistic.
No, I'd already said
I think
that.
when I've
You should be hopeful.
Yeah.
Meaning, like faithful that good things are gonna, or like hopeful. I don't get excited about much because I think it's because I'm like feel like it's gonna end or there's gonna be some like other shoe to drop.
Anyway, we got the season done, and we celebrated by having a big pool party, a big swimming pool party, and it really made me think.
You know that childhood pool game, Marco Polo? I don't know if they play that in Minnesota, but you're in a pool and you say Marco, 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 and then other people have to say Polo, and then you chase after them. And I've always thought of writing like that. It's like a game of Marco Polo, but it's like I'm in my basement for 4 or 5 years just saying Marco, Marco, Marco over and over again, waiting for that one person to read it and say Polo back. And I really like that. Like I'm a pretty introverted person, and but I want to share stories. I want to share ideas with people.
Thank you, John Green. That sums it up nicely. Anyway, we got the season made. We did 20 episodes thanks to enormous support from listeners. Our fundraising has been great. Our sponsors have been fantastic. The support has been really genuinely wonderful. Thank you to all the guests who flew in here just to help me out by delivering a single line. They're now filing off the stage and getting aboard the hilarious World of Depression jet, which is a very dangerous jet to fly on.